He failed again and again, so often that the word again felt stitched into his name. When people spoke about him, it came with a small, tired sigh, the kind that suggested lowered expectations. He was the man who tried, stumbled, apologized, and tried again, only to watch things slip through his fingers at the last second. Each failure had its own shape and sound, the quiet email that began with, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." The hollow clink of coins at the bottom of a jar meant for rent. The look in his mother's eyes that tried to be hopeful and landed somewhere near worry. He learned early how to smile while swallowing disappointment, how to nod as if he understood lessons that felt cruel and repetitive, how to tell himself that tomorrow would be different without knowing how. As a child, he had been curious and stubborn in equal measure. He took apart broken radios not to fix them, but to understand why they had stopped singing. He asked questions that made teachers pause and classmates roll their eyes. Yet curiosity alone didn't translate into success. His family didn't have a language of dreams. They spoke instead of stability and safety, of not rocking the boat. So when he failed his first major exam, the disappointment felt heavier than a grade. It felt like confirmation that curiosity was a luxury he couldn't afford. He told himself it was fine, that plenty of people failed once and still turned out okay, but a small crack formed inside him, the kind that lets doubt seep in slowly. That crack widened with time. He tried to follow the safe paths laid out before him, but he never seemed to walk them quite right. In college, he changed majors twice, not because he was careless, but because nothing fit the shape of his mind. He worked late-night jobs that paid little and demanded much, serving smiles with meals, carrying boxes until his back ached, memorizing faces that never remembered his name. He failed courses by a narrow margin, missed deadlines by minutes, lost opportunities because of choices that made sense only in hindsight. Each failure felt personal, as if the world were keeping score and he was losing badly. People began offering advice with the best intentions and the worst timing. "Maybe you should be more realistic," someone said, as if realism were a switch he could flip. "Not everyone is meant for big things," another offered gently, which somehow hurt more. He nodded, thanked them, and went home to sit in the dark, replaying his mistakes like a looped recording. He wondered if there was something fundamentally wrong with him, some invisible flaw that made success slide past him while clinging effortlessly to others. He tried starting a small business once, convinced that being his own boss would free him from the judgments of others. He poured his savings into it, learned everything he could from free resources, stayed up nights planning and revising. For a few months, it almost worked. There were small wins, moments when he felt the thrill of possibility. Then came unexpected costs, a partner who backed out, a market shift he hadn't anticipated. The business folded quietly, leaving behind debts and a deeper sense of shame. He didn't tell many people about it. Failure, he learned, was easier to carry alone. By his late 20s, the pattern felt set in stone. He was the friend people liked but didn't envy, the relative whose updates were politely vague. He watched others move forward with milestones that seemed to mock him, promotions, marriages, houses with gardens. He told himself not to compare, but comparison crept in anyway, uninvited and relentless. At night, he lay awake imagining alternate versions of his life, paths he might have taken if he had been braver, smarter, luckier. The weight of what if pressed down on him until sleep felt like surrender. The lowest point came quietly, not with drama, but with exhaustion. One evening, after another long day that ended with nothing to show for it, he sat on the edge of his bed and realized he was tired of trying. Not tired in the way a good night's sleep could fix, but tired in his bones, in his spirit. He considered the idea of settling, of choosing a life small enough not to disappoint anyone, including himself. The thought brought a strange sense of relief, followed quickly by grief. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him still wanted more, and that part hurt the most. It was during this period of quiet despair that the decision found him, almost by accident. He hadn't been searching for a revelation. He was simply trying to get through the day. He took a walk through his neighborhood, headphones in, mind elsewhere. He passed a small park he usually ignored and noticed an older man sitting on a bench sketching. The man's hands were steady, his focus intense. Curious, he slowed down. The sketches were rough but alive, full of movement and feeling. He complimented them without thinking. The man looked up, smiled, and said he had started drawing seriously. At 56, after retiring from a job he had hated for decades, They talked for a while. The man spoke about wasted years, about fear disguised as responsibility, about the strange freedom that comes when you stop trying to impress an imaginary audience. He said something that lingered long after they parted. Failure isn't what breaks people. It's failing at things you never cared about in the first place. The words settled into him like a seed, uncomfortable but persistent. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed the conversation, examining his own failures under a new light. How many of them had been attempts to meet expectations that weren't truly his? How many choices had been guided by fear of judgment rather than genuine interest? For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of clarity. The decision wasn't dramatic or grand. It was simple and terrifying. He would stop trying to win at games he didn't believe in. The next morning, he made a list, not of goals, but of things that genuinely fascinated him, things that made time disappear when he engaged with them. The list was short and imperfect, but it felt honest. He chose one thing from it, something he had loved quietly since childhood, but had dismissed as impractical. He decided to give it a year, a real year, measured not by results, but by commitment. No backup plans designed to soothe other people's worries, no half-hearted attempts. Just focus. The change didn't announce itself with immediate success. In fact, the first few months looked a lot like more failure. He struggled, made mistakes, doubted himself daily. The difference was subtle, but profound. The failures no longer felt like betrayals. They felt like information. Each misstep taught him something specific, something he could use. He sought feedback not to validate himself, but to improve. He practiced deliberately, patiently, even when progress was invisible. For the first time, he wasn't measuring himself against others. He was measuring himself against yesterday. People noticed the shift before he did. Friends commented on his energy, on the way he spoke with quiet confidence rather than defensive humor. His mother said he seemed lighter, as if he had set something heavy down. He still worried about money, still faced uncertainty, but it no longer defined him. He learned to sit with discomfort without letting it dictate his choices. He learned that consistency, not intensity, was the real secret he had been missing all along. Opportunities began to appear, small at first, almost shy. A chance collaboration, a modest offer, an email that didn't begin with rejection. He treated each one with care, not desperation. When something didn't work out, he adjusted instead of retreating. The pattern of his life began to change, slowly but unmistakably. Failure was still present, but it was no longer the headline. It was a footnote. The one decision echoed through every part of his life. He set boundaries where he had once said yes out of fear. He allowed himself to be a beginner again, embracing the awkwardness that comes with growth. He stopped hiding his ambitions behind jokes. There were days when doubt returned, loud and convincing, but he had learned to recognize it as a familiar visitor rather than an authority. Years later, when people spoke about him, the sigh was gone. They talked about his persistence, his thoughtful approach, the way he seemed grounded in his choices. Some called him successful, a word he had once chased and now held loosely. He knew the truth was more complex. He hadn't become immune to failure. He had become fluent in it. He understood its language, its lessons, its limits. One evening, he found himself back in the same park, sitting on a bench with a notebook. He watched people pass by, each carrying their own stories, their own quiet battles. He thought about the version of himself who had sat on the edge of the bed, ready to give up. He wished he could reach back through time and say, "You're not broken, you're just playing the wrong game." Instead, he wrote the words down, hoping they might one day reach someone else. He failed again and again, until one decision changed the way he failed, and in doing so, changed everything. The world hadn't suddenly become kinder or easier. He had simply learned to be honest with himself, to choose meaning over approval, to keep going, not because success was guaranteed, but because the path finally felt like his own. And that, he realized, was the quiet victory hidden inside all of those years of loss.